All right, so hello again, everybody. Thanks so much for joining the Cognition School Podcast. I think the first episode went incredibly well, especially just being the first one that I've ever done before. Today we have a amazing guest that I probably should have had years ago putting this together. His name is Brett Johnson. He's the co-founder and CEO of SwitchedOn, and SwitchedOn has been a fantastic partner of ours. Brett has been fantastic. So I wanted to welcome Brett. Yeah, how you doing, man?
Good. Yeah, I'm glad to be on. I was super pumped when I saw you were doing a podcast and was waiting for the invite, so glad I got it.
Yeah, this has been great. It's been a fun experience doing this. So yeah, maybe if you could just quickly introduce yourself, and I've got a bunch of questions to ask you, and we'll make it a little bit of back and forth. So
sure.
Yeah, just do a quick intro for us.
So as you said, I'm the co-founder and CEO of SwitchedOn, which is a mobile app that helps people perform this form of cognitive training using just your mobile device. Kind of a little bit of backstory about how I got started with everything was I graduated from college in 2015 with a degree in Neuroscience. Was super obsessed with the role that the brain played in sports in particular, and I was also a soccer player, so I was a goalkeeper. Small D3 school, had a pretty good career there, and decided afterwards I wanted to go on to pursue a career in professional soccer. So really long journey where I spent a lot of time studying different training methodologies, always like every athlete, trying to do every single thing I could to get better, and really didn't have a whole lot of resources. So was doing a lot of individual training, always experimenting with new ideas. Long story short, I ended up getting to play at the lower league professional level overseas, starting out in England, Germany, Australia, and then came back to the US and bounced around a little bit here. And really throughout this process, through doing so much individual training, I realized just how ineffective it was. And the core reason was because it was missing this cognitive component. So basically realizing that everything I do in training by myself is predetermined, so I know what I'm going to do before I do it. But then in games, everything is done by reacting to something that you see or hear. And I had this real big problem. Probably my biggest problem throughout my entire career was doing well in practice, but then that not translating to the games. And like, as I'm looking at more things, I was involved in every sort of mental training you can think of, meditation, journaling, all this mindset work, which was really helpful, but just my actual skill training or technical training in general was missing that mental component that I needed. Having my degree in neuroscience, I kind of put two and two together, like there needs to be a better solution for this. And that's when I decided to make SwitchedOn and just focused all out on that.
That is awesome. I think just like anything else around us today, that we tend to build things out of just pure necessity, right? And the cognitive program that I've got here is based out of necessity as well. So because we kind of look around and we're like, somebody should have invented this stuff, right? That should have been available sooner. So yeah. So Brett, how long ago was that? Like when you thought about it and said, there's no app for training the brain, like how long ago was that?
I think the initial idea had to have been about 4 or 5 years ago, and I remember it pretty vividly because I had a professional trial in Michigan. So for reference, I'm in Chicago. I asked to go to this professional trial in Michigan, drove up there with my mom. Actually, she loved going on like those road trips with me, and I was in such good physical shape. Like I was so ready for this. And while I was playing, I just realized the game felt so fast for me. And it was like the same level I've been playing at, if anything lower, because they're all trialists. So people who, like, I should have been doing so much better, but I was reacting slow. I was making poor decisions. I just wasn't playing up to the ability that I knew I could. And I knew it had nothing to do with my physical ability. And on the way home, like, I was really bummed out about it. I was talking to my mom about it, and I'm like, I haven't been training these skills because I've been doing so much training by myself, and all I'm doing is these pre-planned movements over and over and over. And just thinking back to when I was playing in Germany, they actually used to have coaches who would come in basically full time, and their job was to show random cues to make you think while you're playing. And I'm like, that is what I needed. Like, that's when I felt like I was playing my best. the game felt so slow for me, and I was like, I knew there was all these different light technologies that were super expensive. I didn't have a whole lot of money, nor could I even get access to some of them because they were just like out of stock when I was calling them up. And I'm like, why can't I just do this same thing on my phone? And that was on that ride home. I literally got out of the car, went to my computer, and was like, how do I make an app that allows people to do this?
That's very cool. Yeah, I mean, obviously to this day, a lot of people, for the equipment that's still out, is out of reach for a lot of people. So I think that what you've done is absolutely brilliant here. Give me some numbers, man. Like how many downloads and how many users are out there?
So it's gotten a lot of traction, which is really exciting. I feel like a lot of people resonated with what we were doing right away. There wasn't a lot of skepticism behind it, which is good, because before I even started it, I'm very, very, as you know, like concerned about the science behind things before I get into it. And I spent before I even started designing the app fully, I was just diving into the research with my neuroscience professors and looking at, the disadvantages of current brain training techniques and what's missing in current physical training techniques and where we can bridge the gap to a more effective way to train. And just right when I put it out, I don't know, just a lot of people were like, we've been looking for something like this. I feel like it was on a lot of people. I got a lot of people reaching out who were like, I want to make the same thing. I had the same exact idea. So yeah, we're about 2.5, maybe 3 years in now. Yeah, coming up on 3 years in. We're at about over 220,000 downloads, which is incredible, used on every single country in the world, which is amazing. I actually had to do that because I was looking at the statistics, and our data was like 220 some countries, and I looked it up, and there's only technically 217 countries. So I'm like, okay, so all the countries plus a couple, it combines some nations and different territories to be technically countries. But yeah, really excited to see how many people are catching on to it. And it's really just the beginning too, because like what you're doing, a lot of it is coming down to education now. Like the tool is there, like a dumbbell, right? Like the tool is there, but unless you know how to use that dumbbell most effectively, you're not going to reap the ultimate benefits of it. And now with more research coming out and more people like you practically implementing it and learning with that feedback actually from people, not just looking at systematic reviews, we're starting to figure out what this optimal methodology is, and it's really exciting to start pushing that out there more.
Yeah, that's really cool, because I came across the app, I think it was either during COVID or just slightly before COVID.
Yeah, that was big for us. COVID is huge. A lot of people were joining in then.
Yeah, exactly. And that's when we started to kind of say, what else could we be doing at home? Yeah, that was definitely a key moment. And that's how we developed the stick handling program as well, using the SwitchedOn app. So I'm glad, in some ways, that we met through COVID. It was a great opportunity for the app to really see the growth. So, and then on the hockey side of things, I know, having been in the hockey community for a long time here in Toronto with Rio and my son here, I didn't know any coaches that were using it at the time, right? Like they're all doing the same kind of, navigating through cones and sliding it through sticks and so on, which are all required skills. But I think there's a need for that added element of, unpredictability. I mean, to be able to see things, react to it, and go in certain directions or take certain actions, right? Whatever that happens to be. I'm really glad I came across that app.
I'm almost hesitant to call those things that you were talking about skills, right? Because the dribbling around cones or stick handling around cones, the doing these pre-planned movements. What's interesting is when you look at that research on agility now, it's showing that essentially what those are is change of direction training. So it's more like, I guess you'd call it technique training or technical training. You're developing the fundamental underlying motor skills to perform the movement. But when you add in this environmental constraint or this environmental external stimulus that is unpredictable and involves decision making, it not only separates elite athletes from novice athletes, but it's also considered a completely different skill, right? Like that is a skill, the relationship between the individual, the environment, and the task, when those pre-planned movements are just building technique, I guess, which there's a lot of debate about if that's even a good way to continue training. I think I agree with you. I think there is definitely a place for it. I think it is important, especially at the younger ages, to develop a fundamental technique that has like characteristics of efficiency and you're not going to get hurt. But I think it's seeming to be more and more important that we do involve the environment and unpredictable variables in it more than we are currently.
Yeah, I think there's a time and space for, going through cones and working on your basic skills and stick handling or skating or, just kind of like that, working on your edges, strides. I mean, those are obviously required, and by no means are we saying that it replaces it, but, to kind of take it to the next level where, we know that the game is changing quickly, and, decision making is now becoming the main, kind of differentiator between an elite player and an average player. We're definitely seeing some of that as well. Yeah,
absolutely. And even going beyond just the decision making aspect, there's just so many other added benefits that you see from doing this. The research on like external focus and increased unpredictability has a huge impact on reducing risk of injury, so reduced risk of ACL injuries, performing under pressure, so getting used to focusing on relevant external information and not worrying about your own internal thoughts and getting into the habit of that is helping reduce choking under pressure, and the list goes on. So that's why like the cognition part is honestly huge. But then when I was looking at it and when I was digging through the research, I'm like, this is beneficial for so many reasons that it's ultimately just a smarter way to train, right? You're going to get more bang for your buck doing this than you are just those pre-planned traditional movements.
Right. I always talk about the concept of leverage. For every minute that you train, your output needs to be disproportional to the input that you put in, right? So, for every minute that you put in, it shouldn't just be some tiny marginal improvement. It needs to be astronomically disproportional. That's why I'm very big on training the brain, because the return you get, the ROI, the return on your investment of time, the output is way disproportional to the input.
Absolutely. Training your brain in correlation with the body, right?
Correct.
With the actual physical, technical skills.
And
that's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah. Those are the additive benefits that you're getting. Yeah, exactly what you were saying.
It kind of bleeds into other areas, like, I get players that come here to train with me that say, I don't have a lot of confidence on the ice. I'm great in practice. I can shoot the puck hard. I can skate really hard. I can lift a lot. I can do all the things that my strength and conditioning coaches have told me that I need to work on. So I've done that. However, in game, everything feels still new to me. It's kind of unfamiliar territory. So then there's a little bit of strain in their mind and their emotions to go, I've never seen this before. How do I deal with it? Next thing you know, you're coughing up the puck as you're out of space and out of time. And I get those types of feedback a lot from people before they first start working with me. And then after we continuously put them through those stressful situations, then they start to realize, oh, this isn't so unfamiliar. This isn't so new to me. I know how to deal with this situation because I've practiced it in my head millions of times, right? So I find that the tool that you've developed is such a critical piece to the equation, because there hasn't been anything like it, unless you grew up in the 80s like I did and played like Nintendo and spent like 6 to 8 hours in an arcade where you're constantly just pushing buttons and moving joysticks and so on. Because that's how I grew up, right? I used to spend all my weekends and all my money in arcades learning about, oh, how do I jump in time? How do I duck in time? How do I lay a punch to a guy that if I'm in a crawl, kind of a crawled position? And so those games to me were it. And I think fast forward to now, everything is exactly that, but a little bit more digitized, a little bit more advanced, but it's still a teachable thing that not a lot of coaches out there today either have access to or have the knowledge to do so. So I think this was really great.
Yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned all these different countries. Where do you find kind of like the most growth right now with the app?
Honestly, a lot of it is Germany, which is
really?
It's not surprising. When being there, you realize it is really one of the biggest adopters for neuroscience-based training. They're very, very up to date in like the latest innovations in incorporating the cognitive component into traditional training methods. So it's actually something called life kinetic training. It's something that I was introduced to when I actually had a goalkeeping trainer who was in the United States who was from Germany and introduced me to it. And then when I got over to Germany, it was so interesting. And this was like when they were winning the World Cup. They're winning the German teams, like Bayern Munich was winning the Champions League. They were dominating everything. And they were creating like the football knot, which is like this whole $3.5 million room that had little gates that light up everywhere and shoot balls at you. And they're so in tune with like this ability to scan and be aware, hyper aware of your surroundings, which allows them to make decisions faster than everybody. This was all coming around when I was there, and like our goalkeeping trainer had us doing drills with an eye patch on and the occlusion glasses and all these different techniques, and I was immediately able to feel it, which was so important. I'm like, I feel myself getting better just because I'm making this more cognitively challenging, and it's feeling slower to me. That's when I really started getting interested in it, and like that's when I realized like Germany is a very big adopter of what we're doing. They're really on top of it.
Oh, that's great, because I definitely think that even in the US too, like they always seem to be trying different things and trying to explore and try different things. I think in Canada we're not quite there yet, where things are the way it's been, because it's been like that for the last 10 or 15 years, and so they just kind of continue on with that. I think the exponential growth is definitely coming from outside of North America, but that's not just for soccer, right? It could be it's a lot of other sports as well, where I find that the Europeans definitely want to experiment more with data and implement more technologies and so on. So I definitely agree with you.
A lot of different sports too, yeah, because there's really like a scale in terms of like the amount of cognitive complexity involved with the sport itself. Like you think of like soccer and hockey and like team invasion and ball sports, where there's constantly people moving around you and there's balls flying everywhere and you have to make all these decisions, and there's so much information that you have to process during this time. And then you look at sports like, you can take like golf for instance, where it's very pre-planned, predetermined, you take your time, everything's just dealing this one movement and trying to do that movement as efficiently as possible. So yeah, there is that spectrum of, we're seeing like these more cognitively challenging sports, we're seeing more adoption from. So soccer, hockey, tennis, there's a lot of like mental endurance and reaction needed in tennis. Football, I think it's over like 35 sports now. Like pickleball, crowball, we had some crazy different suggestions recently for like training content in there. But yeah, that's why it's so like good to put together these courses and this education. Like, okay, how do we implement this effectively for your sport? So like creating what we call a representative design with this type of training that gives you the best opportunity for transfer from training to competition. So like not just putting it on the ground, looking down at your feet, reacting to it, and then doing movements that aren't even relevant to your sport. It's like putting the stimulus where you'd be looking during the games, making decisions, your physical actions like you would be during games, and then adding in different constraints to make it more challenging. And then like having those key components, I think is super important for people to get the most out of this.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the most common question I get from our athletes when they're using SwitchedOn is, hey, can you suggest certain types of drills I should be doing pre-game or when I'm not working with you? And I love those types of questions, because what that shows is they have the intention of wanting to do more, and they just need a little bit more of that guidance or the push to be able to make the most effective use out of it.
That's a good one too that you mentioned, is the warm-ups too. Like traditional warm-ups, there's a lot of good research on like open skill versus closed skill warm-ups, which, to make it, if the audience hasn't heard about it, just closed skill is a pre-planned movement where you know what you're gonna do before you do it. Open skill is a more randomized, unpredictable movement. And they are showing that like adding more, because typically you go through like your pre-planned movements that you do before the game. You do your mobility things, all those are essential, but then even during the game, your skill work is you're just passing, repetitive, you know what you're gonna do before you do it. But adding in this unpredictability and variability to your warm-ups is hugely effective at not only improving your performance, but also reducing that risk of injury. So it's like a twofold aspect, where it's like there's so many different areas you can implement this. And now we're just talking about sports, right? Like before I even started this, I was like, if it's only a sports training app, it's not enough for me to quit my soccer career to do this. And then when I started seeing about how it's helping reduce the risk of neurodegenerative diseases and help with military and first responders to perform better during combat and all these other areas, I'm like, okay, this really is a movement. And just a smarter way to train that needs to be democratized, needs to be properly educated, and would love to be the one to help do that. And thank God I came across people like you who can help me out.
Yeah, I think this is great because it's, my background is in education as well, so to be able to help other people quickly get up to speed is really one of my missions with ReactForge, is being able to take your amazing product that you've built and just let the whole world know about it, so then people can do it at home. They don't have access to resources. If they're, in the middle of a small town and they don't have access to, coaches that do this. I mean, that's really where I find the greatest opportunity is using the app, giving access to information that no one, that previously they couldn't get access to, right?
Literally what I dreamed I would have had, right? Like, the amount of random little trinkets and training, like bands and reaction balls and things that I would buy that are cheap, or not cheap, I guess affordable, because I found a lot of them helpful. Just ways that can help me train better by myself, because that's probably one of the key things I learned from all the best athletes I played with too. I was able to play under some incredible MLS players, Serie A players, really great elite level players, and all of them are doing extra work on their own. It's not just like something that you have to do during COVID. It's an essential part of becoming a great athlete and enjoying the game. How can we make that more effective, and for coaches to help provide their team with that as like a great way to empower them to train smarter on their own? Yeah, it's just a huge part of it that I feel like kind of goes neglected.
Yeah, because I think, up until recently, everybody was doing the same stuff. They thought, okay, if I got stronger, if I lifted, hundreds of pounds, that might make me a better player. And that may be true, but I think there's other areas that are being neglected, only because they're just not aware that those things exist. However, we hear the same conversations over and over again. They always talk about hockey IQ or soccer IQ, having those smarts to be able to make better decisions, better plays. And, going back to the point about unpredictability, on a line of 5, players in hockey, if one of them was unpredictable, that's great, right? And the other, if the other players were just kind of like straight line, doing the traditional stuff, and then if you have one kind of like a, Wayne Gretzky type of a unpredictable, you don't know where he's going to be next, that's great. But what if you had the whole line thinking that way, right? So looking at it from a micro level from an individual to now, maybe what if you have, a Yari Curry on the Oilers paired up with Gretzky, and they were just as unpredictable, to the opponent, but when they're on the same line, they just are, it's just magical to watch. And I think the more that we can at the micro level work to get the app into the hands of these players, next thing you know, you'll have one line, right? One forward line, 3 players that are kind of working, unpredictably to the opponent, but to each other, they all know what they're doing, right? And I think the more we can do that, I think that the more powerful these teams will get, because all the plays that I've been posting online the last couple days is all of that. They're not skating 120% constantly. They don't need a heart rate, to measure, every second that they're on, because sometimes you're going full speed, but most of the time you're probably going about 50, 40, 30%. You're just trying to position yourself in a certain way that, hey, that no one's looking at you, right? So they don't even know that you're a threat. And that doesn't involve 20-meter sprints all the time. It doesn't involve them constantly, having to push so hard. I mean, the best elite players that I see in the NHL right now, they could be on for 3-4 minutes if they wanted to, because they're just at the right place at the right time, reading body language in a very short period of time, in the fixed amount of time, and still being able to make plays, still being able to make passes, still being able to hide behind people and know that nobody's watching them. And I think that's the direction that the game is going. It's almost very similar to soccer in a sense, right? Because you're not always going 100%, every second you're on. You're always constantly looking and thinking, putting yourself in certain positions. And I think it's kind of going in that direction. I don't know if you agree with that.
No, absolutely. And soccer is very similar. Like, it's all about identifying those spaces and knowing where you're supposed to be, knowing where your teammates are going to be. And for us, like, we are only one part of that too. So like there's also watching film and understanding where you're supposed to be, and then playing in real games and getting used to your teammates and getting to know where each other's going to be, and developing those relationships. So yeah, there's that whole equation that also goes back to the more action capacity type stuff. How fast can you skate? How fast can you change direction? Those are also equally as important. I know we're super focused on like this, like I guess you'd call it cognitive training aspect, but there's just so much that, yeah, it's just putting it all together, and there's so much involved in becoming an elite athlete that it's just great that we can at least be one part of that equation.
I think so. I mean, hockey is such a complex sport, right? That there's just so many parts that you need to work on. I wish it was as simple as, like track, where you're just running in a straight line.
Exactly.
And I think that's where some people kind of put all their eggs in that basket, that I need to sprint faster. So they go and work with a track coach, and that's great. There might be other things that you can definitely work on. And so there's a lot. And that's, I mean, going through it, like, that's probably one of the things I found most enjoyable. Like, I love trying to find different areas of my game that needed improvement, researching how I can improve those, whether it was my agility or, like, as a goalkeeper, like, I want to work on my hands a lot. So like having softer hands, better catching, more explosive diving, better communication, better leadership skills, and just always looking for new ways to get better. And I feel like from most of the people that I see who play, these are the type of people who innovate new ways of training, because you've done it all personally. You've looked through everything and you've experienced all this, and you're like, I want to help the people who are below me who are the same way. We're also trying to get better and trying to find new ways to get better and get better faster, really. Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because whenever I'm working with athletes, there's a bunch of different questions I ask. Obviously, like, what position do you play? Because the training for cognitive is going to be different from position to position. So I go from a very macro level and I work my way down to a very micro level, to the point of asking a goalie, hey, do you catch with your left hand or do you catch with your right hand? Because my training is going to be different for a left catching goalie versus a right catching goalie. Those types of details, it allows me to ask those questions, because then I know the training where I want to go is going to be different. So without the SwitchedOn tool, for me, it would never allow me to open those types of doors. If all I was doing was strength and conditioning, who cares if you're a left-handed catcher or a right-handed catcher? You're going to be doing the same thing. If I need to get the goalie to think, like if I need to simulate a situation for that goalie, I need to know which hand you catch with. Or if you have a left-handed shooter coming at you, how do you track the puck? How do you track body movements? What if he's a right-handed shot? How do you track the puck and how do you track the movement? And so those little details, like, for me, like, everything matters, right? And then obviously we've got the solution now with the app to be able to come up with a specific drill to say, okay, Johnny, I need you to think about this type of situation. You're facing the left side as a right-handed goalie, meaning you catch with your left. And then imagine that player coming across the center line, and now you got to look in this direction. That's how I want you to think, and that's how I want you to do this drill.
Try to really imagine that scenario as you're going through it. Yeah, that's a brilliant way to use it.
Yeah, and I think that's where and that's one of the things that I usually teach through the certification training as well for trainers, to not just think about, okay, what drills do I need? Tell me what drills should I do, right? Because that's always the common question I get. But, okay, well, what outcome are you trying to achieve first? What information have you gathered about that player that's going to determine what type of drill you may want to go through? There is almost like a template in my head that I go through now, because we've trained so many athletes. These are very quality questions that every trainer should be asking, especially if they're going to go into a cognitive development point of view.
Yeah, you got to make it tailored to the individual. So there's all different, some people are better at some things, worse at some areas. Making it so you're, whether you're trying to make their strength stronger or improve their weaknesses, what time of the year you're doing it. There's so many different factors to take in. And yeah, that's like, we try to do the best we can throughout the app. Obviously, we're working on a lot more customization that we can do to make it better tailored to each individual. But it's also amazing to have a coach who understands it, who can then take it, because we're never going to be able to create the 100,000 different scenarios that every hockey player is going to go through, right? So having someone who has this knowledge and it's like, he's really struggling with this particular aspect of his game, let's make these game-like scenarios in training so you can get used to them without putting them straight into a game and say, hey, get better at that scenario that you're only going to see maybe once every other game. So yeah, it's good to be able to get a lot of reps in a game-like scenario for different things that each individual has to work on.
You said about 35 sports that the app is being used for. Any surprise kind of sports that's come across?
We had so many handball players at one point, and I was like, I don't really know what handball is that well. And I had to look it up, and I'm like, definitely makes sense. It's a very, very complex, high tempo, like cognitively challenging sport. So there was one called KROF ball. I just got a request the other day, like, hey, can you put Crow ball? It's kind of like beach pickleball, it looked like. It was really strange. So yeah, a lot of water polo, some really interesting sports that are using it. Sailing.
Really?
Which is really cool. So yeah.
Obviously, you've received a ton of feedback from some of your athletes. Any kind of surprises there that you kind of thought, oh, that's good to hear, to be able to some of the things that they've experienced.
It's honestly very reaffirming to hear the kind of things that people are experiencing. They're like, the game's been feeling so much slower for them. They've been reacting so much faster. They feel much more confident and composed while they're on the field. I think one of the more interesting ones that's been really exciting to me that I didn't really think through as much is just how much funner it makes the actual training for them. Right, like instead of just going over cones and doing these pre-planned moves, like I do it specifically because it's just more fun, and like obviously I'm getting benefits from it, but that's a huge aspect. If it's more fun, if it's more challenging, you're going to be more focused on it, you're going to be more engaged in the actual training, not just thinking about the exact movements you're doing. You're really involved in this experience, and that's going to end up leading to better results. I think that was probably one of the coolest things for me, and the more I use it, I experience it too. I'm like, if I'm going to go do agility, I would much rather do this and have this competitive aspect to it than just going and running through cones like I would typically do.
Yeah, you're just getting tired, and it's not a lot of fun at all, right?
Yeah, you're right, exactly.
Yeah.
Better have a good playlist on.
Yeah, I think the other, benefits, of course, is kind of the, what do you call it? Let's call it post-sport, right? So if you're just an adult, maybe your minor hockey career is kind of coming to an end because maybe you've got some other interests, but those types of skills and traits that you learn having gone through some of the drills on the app or along with your sport, it also extends into your life as well, right? So whether you're driving a car, or I don't know, like I had a parent that told me about how one of my students saved a donut that was about to fall on the floor, but he was able to quickly catch it, and then before it hit the floor, and he looked at it and said, "This is Satoshi's work."
It's got to be a good feeling.
Yeah, it is, and this kid, I think he's 6 or 7 years old. To be able to see that, the great thing, the validation point for me is when whether they're in game or whether in life in general, they take action on something that it was completely instinctive, but then they reference it back to a particular drill or an exercise that we did here.
Yeah, that's incredible.
And
yeah,
that is like, wow. I mean, we talk about, what do other people say about you when you're not in the room? And when I get those types of messages of saying, like, Satoshi, like, I saw that drill in my head in the game while I was playing. So now it's like the reverse. We've always been training to translate to the game. Funny thing, in their game, it's translating back to a drill that they did here when they're competing. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. That's really cool.
That is incredible. Yeah, I kind of see two different aspects of that. Like the first one is just post sport, just still training like an athlete. Like I just did not enjoy going to the gym and just lifting weights as much as I do I like that part too, but I like doing agility drills. I like playing the sport. I like doing things that are still like the sport. Having this to continue to have that aspect in my training is brilliant. But also the unfortunate thing is, as we get older, these cognitive skills naturally decline. So reaction time, executive functioning, memory. And what research is showing is that while brain games, so the brain games, they strengthen the brain through like neuroplasticity. And I'm going to try to make this just like layman's terms. Our science advisor, Ryan Glad, is very big into this space. But so brain games strengthen the brain. Physical exercise strengthens the brain as well. So running, exercising, that strengthens it. But what the research is showing is that doing them in combination strengthens the brain more than doing them separately. Now, if your goal is to increase like the longevity and the overall quality of your life, then typically someone would do is they would exercise, but then they'd do some brain games to stimulate their mind. But why not now do them simultaneously to not only get better physical and cognitive benefits, but also just to enjoy your training more, to have more fun as you're training. So yeah, that aspect of it is so exciting as like a direction that we can help out people post sports as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Because and also, you know, balance and coordination and
oh yeah,
right, and
fall prevention. Yeah, it's a big aspect. Yeah, there's actually a meta-analysis too, which is like one of the like strongest forms of research that you can come across, showing that reactive stepping, so reacting to a stimulus and stepping in a direction, can help reduce falls in elderly individuals. I think it was like over 50 years by up to 50%. So 50% less likely to fall. Yeah, wow. Incredible. So like think how many people are falling and breaking their hips when they're older. Being able to like play a key role in preventing that it's unbelievable. It's what keeps me motivated.
Yeah, exactly. Well, in Canada, and I'm pretty sure that the US is pretty close, but they say in 8 years, 25% of the Canadian population will be over the age of 65. 25%, right? And in the same time frame, in 8 years, over 1 million people in Canada are going to be living with Alzheimer's.
Wow.
So, and I think the U.S. is pretty close proportionally. You know, it's going to happen, like it or not, right? And so I think the sooner that we can start helping, right, with some of these ailments that people are just going to have, the better, right?
Yeah, because they can be pushed back. You know, like we can't completely eliminate the fact that neurodegenerative diseases are a thing, because as you age, it's just something that'll naturally happen. But we can extend that quality of life. And I think that's where we come in, right? Like we can make these years better for you but it takes effort, right? It's not just like, it's like goes back to the dumbbell. A dumbbell is useless in itself. It's actually knowing how to use it and then going out and lifting the damn thing every single day and doing it consistently.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to maybe touch back on the app as well, like, you know, there's tons of kind of evolutions that the app has gone through in the last little while. You and I worked on the on-demand, you know, remote capability, and I thought that was like super fantastic. Do you want to talk a little bit about that feature for some of the coaches that are out there?
Yeah, so it stemmed from you who usually uses the iPad as a tool that the athletes are reacting to, but a key component of it is being able to make that stimulus appear at the right time. So when we go back to thinking about games, it's not completely unpredictable where just out of nowhere someone's gonna make a crazy action, right? Like there's anticipation involved where you know at a certain timing you're gonna have to make a decision, and that's usually like depending on how close you get to someone. So yeah, now what you can do is use any Bluetooth shutter remote. So we have some on our website that we tested, like $5-10, and you can use it to manually change when the stimulus appears from anywhere. So you can be walking around there and then you can change it whenever you want. You can make the intensity higher by clicking it faster so you get them reacting faster. And also you can use it for baseline assessments. So doing reactive agility assessments, when you press that button, it'll measure the amount of time from stimulus appearing until you press that button. So you can measure, have like an accurate score of their reactive agility, which I think is really exciting and super helpful for some of you guys. That's great,
because I you know, for a while I was like, oh, there's got to be a way that a coach can control when they see that stimulus, and I went and saw my my handy selfie stick, and I'm like, wait a minute, that's a Bluetooth enabled device, right?
That was a brilliant, all credit goes to you for that, 100%, because I did not even think about that. So yeah, incredible suggestion.
Yeah, that's great. Anything kind of coming up that you can either talk about or or briefly talk about in terms of what we can look forward to with the app?
Yeah, so we are very early on in the product, so we see a lot more room for innovation with this. We have not even really scratched the surface. Customization, so we want to have more customized training programs per the individual and make it easier for them. So basically you go into the app, you know exactly what you need to do every single day. So like there's your session for the day, you start it based off of like your onboarding questions or different things that you answer throughout the app. So making that is a big aspect that we're looking forward to. Working with teams, so like a teams platform, so allowing entire teams to purchase it for all their athletes, and then being able to track their performance, making sure they're accountable, seeing that they're using the app, assigning training sessions. That's something we've been working on for a long time. And then a couple other things that I'm gonna have to hold off on just because I want to make sure we design it well and make sure it's coming together well. I don't want to overpromise. So those are the two things that we are really gung-ho on and that we've got pretty well fleshed out, and now it's just executing on our end.
I get that question a lot as well. Can we use SwitchedOn with teams? And the answer is
all
absolutely.
the time. All the time.
Yeah.
And it's we're still a small team, right? It's bootstrapped really, and it's really just getting the resources we need to execute on it and make sure it's a great product. So, but we're getting there. We have an awesome team.
That's wonderful. But hey, I really appreciate you coming on. You know, the tool is absolutely fantastic. I want to tell everybody who's listening to this to go and download it on App Store or Google Play, right? Just download it. You'll love it, and dive right into some of the programs. Yeah, I think this is fantastic. So thanks so much for coming on today. This is great, Brett.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks for everything that you do too. Keep it up. It's amazing.
Yeah, we'll do. Every athlete that comes here to train with me, I'm always trying different things, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, I could do that. Let's document that. So we'll definitely we'll keep pushing the envelope. So appreciate the time. Appreciate the time.
Yeah. Thanks, Satoshi.
All right, Brett, thank you. And hope to talk to you next time on Cognition School. Thanks a lot, everyone.